As a weak woman is often one who constantly seeks validation from others rather than from Allah. She feels the need to be seen, heard, appreciated and praised by people around her, family, friends, or even strangers on social media. Her self-worth becomes tied to the compliments she receives, the attention she gets, or how others view her lifestyle, beauty, or choices. This, my brothers and sisters, is a very fragile way to live, because people's hearts change. Their words are temporary. Their love is often conditional. When the approval of creation becomes the priority, the disapproval of the Creator is overlooked, and this opens the door to many spiritual and emotional problems. Such a woman may dress, speak, or behave in ways that attract attention, not because she believes it pleases Allah, but because she is hungry for affirmation from society. She might feel pressured to constantly appear perfect, happy, or successful, even if it means living a lie. This cycle becomes exhausting, and deep down, it leaves her empty. Why? Because the hearts of people are not a source of peace. That peace only comes from Allah. No matter how many people tell you that you're beautiful or successful, if your heart is distant from your Creator, those words will never be enough. Islam teaches us to anchor our identity and self-worth in the relationship with Allah, not in public opinion. A strong woman does not need to parade herself to gain value. Her strength lies in her humility, her sincerity, and her devotion. She knows that even if the whole world ignores her, as long as Allah is pleased with her, she has succeeded. That mindset is empowering. It gives a woman dignity, purpose, and calmness in her soul. But when this perspective is lost, a woman becomes weak in character, always needing someone else to validate her existence. We must remember that the Prophet Muhammad taught us that the most beloved people to Allah are those who are sincere and humble. He never taught us to seek attention or praise from others. In fact, he warned us against riyah, showing off our deeds to be seen by others. So when a woman constantly posts everything online to seek approval or brags about her life just to impress others, she's walking a dangerous path. It weakens her spiritually and emotionally, making her vulnerable to heartbreak, anxiety, and even jealousy. Instead, a strong woman turns to Allah. She seeks His approval in her dress, in her decisions, in her silence. She reminds herself that Allah knows what's in the heart, and that's enough. She doesn't need to prove herself to people who don't even understand her journey. This is not about isolating oneself, it's about prioritizing the right audience, and that audience is Allah. So let us raise ourselves and our daughters to stop chasing people's praise and start chasing Allah's pleasure. That is the path to true strength and peace. One of the clear signs of a weak woman is her gradual neglect of salah and spiritual discipline. It doesn't always happen overnight. It begins subtly. She starts delaying her prayers, telling herself she'll pray later, until eventually the salah becomes something she does only when convenient. What she fails to realize is that her strength, her emotional balance, her inner peace, all of it is tied directly to her connection with Allah. And when that connection weakens, so does her ability to deal with life's challenges, temptations, and hardships. Salah is not just a ritual. It is the anchor of a believer's life. It is the spiritual oxygen that keeps the soul alive. When a woman begins to deprive herself of this oxygen, she starts gasping spiritually, seeking comfort in places where it cannot be found. She may begin to feel anxious, lonely, or depressed, not realizing that the absence of prayer is leaving a void in her heart. The Quran reminds us, indeed, prayer prohibits immorality and wrongdoing. Surah Al-Ankabut 29:45. So when prayer is removed, it becomes easier for immorality to creep in and take hold. A weak woman forgets that her true strength comes from sujud, from those quiet moments in the early hours of the morning where she weeps before her Lord, asking Him for strength, guidance, and protection. She replaces those sacred moments with scrolling through her phone or chasing worldly distraction. Slowly, the Quran gathers dust, her dikhan becomes rare, and her heart becomes restless. The peace she used to feel when she remembered Allah disappears, and she begins to look for fulfillment in things that only bring more confusion. But a strong woman, even when she is broken, even when she feels overwhelmed, runs towards Salah, not away from it. She understands that missing Salah is like letting go of the rope that connects her to her Creator. And without that rope, everything else starts to fall apart. That's why the Prophet, even in his final moments, emphasized, guard your prayers, because he knew that without Salah, we are spiritually lost. Salah is also a form of discipline. A woman who protects her Salah trains herself to resist laziness, distractions, and the whims of the nafs. It shapes her into someone who is punctual, focused, and spiritually aware. On the other hand, when Salah is neglected, her day loses structure, her soul becomes neglected, and sins start to feel easier. She becomes more vulnerable to whispers of shaitan, who always starts with the small things, like convincing her to delay prayer until he leads her away completely. So the lesson is clear. Spiritual strength begins with Salah. A weak woman will let it slip because she doesn't understand its value. But a strong woman clings to it, knowing that her relationship with Allah is her greatest source of strength, protection, and dignity. A weak woman often allows her emotions to overpower her intellect and religious principles, making decisions based on momentary feelings rather than wisdom and guidance from the Quran and Sunnah. Emotional strength in Islam doesn't mean denying feelings. It means learning to control them, to navigate them in a way that pleases Allah. When a woman becomes enslaved to her emotions, she becomes reactionary. She may speak harshly when angry, isolate herself when hurt, or make hasty decisions she later regrets, all because she didn't pause to reflect, to seek clarity through prayer or consultation. A woman ruled by emotion may respond to conflict with shouting instead of patience, to heartbreak with despair instead of tawakkul, and to disappointment with blame instead of introspection. Islam teaches us that true strength lies in suppressing anger, showing mercy, and turning to Allah in every state. The Prophet said, "The strong is not the one who overcomes people by his strength, but the one who controls himself while angry." When a woman forgets this, she becomes weak, not because she has feelings, but because she lets those feelings direct her actions without discipline. Sometimes this emotional weakness causes her to stay in harmful situations out of fear, or to leave good situations out of pride. She may hold on to toxic friendships or relationships just because she is afraid of loneliness, even if they are harming her deen. Or she may push away those who care for her out of stubbornness or insecurity. Her decisions are impulsive, based on what she feels in the moment, rather than what is truly right for her long-term well-being, both in this life and the hereafter. A wise woman, on the other hand, trains her emotions through her faith. When she is sad, she doesn't drown in self-pity. She makes dua. When she is angry, she seeks refuge in Allah. When she is confused, she prays istikhara. This is the difference between weakness and strength. A strong woman doesn't deny her pain, but she channels it through the right path. She remembers that the heart is always in a state of fluctuation, but Allah's guidance is constant. And if she holds on to that guidance, her emotions become a means of growth, not destruction. A weak woman believes that reacting emotionally makes her real or honest. But honesty does not mean recklessness. The Sahabiyat, the righteous women of the past, faced pain, loss and betrayal, but they responded with dignity, wisdom and faith. That is what we must aim for. To overcome emotional weakness, a woman must know herself, understand her triggers, and constantly seek refuge in Allah. She must remind herself that decisions made in anger, jealousy, or desperation are rarely wise. She must learn to pause, reflect, consult, and then act. That ability is not weakness, it is strength wrapped in patience and guided by Allah. A weak woman often compromises her modesty in order to fit in, to be accepted, or to feel valued in a society that constantly tells her she needs to reveal more, act bolder, and follow trends to be seen as worthy. She may begin to loosen her hijab, speak more freely with non-mahram men, or present herself in ways that gain worldly praise but strip away her spiritual strength. This happens when the fear of being left out becomes stronger than the fear of displeasing Allah. But what she doesn't realize is that each step away from modesty takes her further from the peace and dignity that Allah intended for her. Islam honors women with modesty, not as a restriction but as a protection. The hijab is not just a cloth on the head. It is a shield for the heart, a statement of purpose, a silent declaration that I submit to Allah before anyone else. But a weak woman may begin to view hijab and modesty as a burden rather than a badge of honor. But if one commits a weak act, its implications are harmful to Allah. It is a burden rather than a badge of honor. She starts to feel embarrassed or pressured when she's the only one dressed differently, and so she compromises little by little. Her standards drop, not because she wants to disobey Allah, but because the desire to be accepted overwhelms her courage to be different. The weakness of a woman is not measured by her emotions, appearance, or social standing, but by how far she distances herself from the principles that Allah has laid down for her protection and dignity. She has learned to accept the worst and feel that evil can always be materialized. She has learned to feel that while she is bounty, her destiny is the same as every other. But the rays of the sun, the temperature of the water, the presence of the moon, the power of the sea and the physical city seeking validation from people, neglecting salah, letting emotions override faith and compromising modesty may seem like small things, but they slowly chip away at the strength of a believing woman. Islam teaches us that true strength is not in pleasing society, but in submitting to the will of Allah with full sincerity and commitment. A strong woman guards her salah, controls her emotions, maintains her modesty, and seeks the pleasure of her Creator above all else. She is not weak because she faces challenges. She is strong because she turns to Allah through them. So let us not chase the fleeting standards of this world. Let us return to the path of Allah, where our true worth is defined not by people's praise, but by the light of our faith and the sincerity of our actions. May Allah make us among those women who are firm, faithful and fearless in their commitment to Islam. Ameen. The Prophet said, every religion has a distinct characteristic, and the distinct characteristic of Islam is modesty. When modesty is lost, the distinction between believers and non-believers begins to fade. A woman's strength lies in being able to say, I will not trade the pleasure of my Creator for the applause of the people. But a weak woman may feel the opposite, that being covered, being reserved, or upholding her principles makes her invisible or backward. She may think that to be respected, she must dress and behave like everyone else. In reality, there is no greater strength than standing firm in what Allah loves, especially when the world pulls you in the opposite direction. Modesty is not just about clothes. It's in the way a woman speaks, walks, posts on social media, and carries herself. A weak woman gives in to the pressure to be noticed. She shares pictures or stories that seek attention rather than reflect taqwa. She may laugh loudly in mixed gatherings or try to appear overly charming, believing this is what makes her confidence. But confidence that comes from disobedience is not true confidence. It is emptiness in disguise. A strong woman understands that modesty brings respect, not shame. She knows that her beauty is sacred, not for public display. She realizes that those who truly value her will admire her for her principles, not for how much of herself she reveals. So she guards her modesty like a precious gem, because she knows that what is precious is always protected. Compromising modesty may bring short-term validation, but it causes long-term spiritual decline. True strength is saying no to the world when it contradicts what Allah has commanded. That strength begins when a woman understands her worth in the sight of her Lord, not in the sight of the people.